Welcome to WHAQ, a talk show centered around the beauty of queerness and the challenges it brings, with hosts Pansexual Princess, Get Lizzie with it, she, her, and the Sapphic Sensation, Games Mistress.
Games Mistress.
Gaymes, also, she, her.
I'm excited. I love Casey McQuiston, and I'm going to be in the driver's seat for this one. But Liz also loves Casey McQuiston, and we've experienced the work together. So there we go. So just as like way of intro, and I haven't done a ton of research about them, but I'm just going to like, you know, this is how I used to do my radio show. I had a radio show about books, and I just like sit down and talk about books and people. So here I am. So Casey McQuiston is a non-binary author, uses they, them pronouns. And they grew up first of all, they're like about Liz's age. So like very, very early 30s.
I did actually look them up. They are same birth year. They're January and I'm the December.
I knew it was 91. And so grew up in Colorado and actually grew up and I think this is relevant, grew up in like an evangelical Christian like school and like had a very, very like religious upbringing and felt really isolated as a queer person. And so when they grew up, they basically decided to tell stories that are meant to make queer people feel less alone, which is exactly how I've felt in reading their stuff. Mm-hmm. Currently live in New York. Yeah. And so they're non-binary and bisexual. They identify as bisexual. So, and I don't know if they have any like partners or anything right now, but I do know that they have a puppy named Pepper.
Oh, do you know what breed Pepper is?
No.
Oh, I must find out.
Yeah. Well, why don't you look while I chat?
Okay, I will.
And yeah, so they have a puppy named Pepper, and they have a few books out now. So their first book came out in 2019 and it was called Red, White, and Royal Blue. I sometimes like slur that name for some reason because it's like, I don't know, it doesn't fit in my mouth. Right. And that came out in 2019. And then in 2021, One Last Stop came out. And since then they've released a young adult. So like those two were adult novels, or like some people might say that they're like, there's like, we always debate about age ranges, but they're like adult-ish anyway.
I mean, there are sex scenes in them.
There are sex scenes in young adult.
Is there? I mean, I'm not an avid reader, so
yeah,
I can't find the puppy's name.
I
mean, the puppy's breed.
And so, is that not a word you use, Rick? Slur? Do people not slur their words?
I think Rick is playing silly buggers, isn't you?
Oh, that's so British. I just thought I just speak Canadian still, and it's getting worse the longer I'm back in Canada. I need to go back to the land of trolleys and boots and braces and loo rolls.
And vests.
Vests.
I saw you talk about earlier, and vests.
Oh no, it's good, Rick. I just thought sometimes I'm just really Canadian, and I mean sometimes in Canada I'm just really East Coast. So they don't know what I'm talking about here either. Yes, it is, Mommy. Thank you.
What's a vest elsewhere?
This is not the conversation we're in right now, babe.
Okay, well, you know, just
conversation. Vest is like, remember when I was like, oh yeah, formal wear.
A waistcoat, right? I remember.
A waistcoat. That's what it is there, yeah. Oh, Debs, don't even get me started on crisps and chips and anyway. And so just released, like I say like in the last year, I think, a young adult novel. 2022, I think.
I Kissed Sarah Wheeler came out in 2022.
Yep. And so we started with like reading One Last Stop. And One Last Stop was the longest book we've read together because it's almost 400 pages, or maybe even a little bit more than 400 pages, depending on the edition. And I read to Liz. We haven't done it in a little while. We've been busy, but I read to Liz before bed. And so picked One Last Stop, and because it was sapphic.
I was
And
just
that's what
about
we
to
knew,
ask, and I was
basically.
about to say, like, why did you pick it? Was it because it's woman loves woman?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it, but it was also like basically everyone, like, I hadn't read it yet, and I didn't really know much about it. I try not to read too much about books because sometimes I find the synopsis gives away too much.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, like, everyone on my Goodreads who had the same reading taste as me was giving it 5 stars. And
Nice.
I was just like, okay, that's one to think about. But it also just kind of like I'd heard good things about Casey McQuiston, because this was their second book and everyone had loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I had liked Red, White, and Royal Blue. And I find their writing really easy to get into. And I
Oh yeah,
think that in
100%.
part that might be, like, they write in a pretty, like, fast pace. It's a bit of a page turner without it being too actiony. Like, it's not like, oh, you're trying to turn the page to find out like the next action. It's just really engaging and flows really easily. In fact, if it wasn't for like how long it took because we were reading it out loud, I wouldn't really think it was a long book. I only realized it was a long book because it took us months to read.
Yeah, and that's what I like about their writing is that, like, so some of you might know I'm not a reader. Like, I try so hard. I have such a bad time with focus. I have such a bad time with memory, and some of it is, probably down to having it be read to me. And I can stop if something's not clicking. I can be like, oh, Gem, could you just explain this to me? Or I don't understand the reference, can you help me here? But it was great. Like, both books that we've read so far just flowed so well and just kept me so engaged, which is exactly what I need because I struggle so much.
But I just I think it's important to highlight that Casey has talked openly about having ADHD and that it impacts their writing. They often write in like fits and starts in terms of like a bit here, a bit there, write a bunch now, come away, write a bit more. And so I think I think that for them, they need to find their own writing engaging, and that helps, right? Like, we've all read books, or many of us have read books by authors who love the sound of their own voice, who are sure that they're making a masterpiece. And so it's just like 8 years of description. And like we know those writers, right? And like, this is going to be like, they're going to revoke my Canadian citizenship after this, but fucking Margaret Atwood, who's an amazing human and is a good person, and every time I've talked to her, she's lovely.
All right,
Margaret
name
Atwood is
drop.
a lovely. No, I Jing, like, she's a good, lovely person. But you can tell. So Margaret Atwood is a writer who like is very, or at least maybe not now, but back when she was writing 10 years ago and before that, was very open that like writing was her day job. She got up, had breakfast, sat down and wrote, had lunch, sat down and wrote, had dinner, had her evening, started again the next day. And I once played a game where I could tell you where she had lunch and dinner in one of her books. I may have written a 4th year English literature in university paper on that.
Well then.
Sorry, Margaret Atwood. But her content, like, her ideas are great and she's an amazing person. It's just sometimes I find the writing a bit of a slog.
Yeah. I actually didn't know
Because
that McQuiston has ADHD, which honestly checks out. Like, maybe that's why I liked it so much. Yeah.
maybe we just need to, and that's why it's important to have writers of all sort, like, right? Because like not everyone reads the same thing. There are people that love, like, the people that are listing, right? Tolkien, R.R. Martin, like, there are people who love that. Awesome. I'm glad that exists for them. We need all sorts of books.
Get to the point.
But I think we're a little different, right? It's like from that. So really engaging, really great. But one of the ideas in their work that I want to talk about, and then we can talk about the individual pieces, that we're talking about today, the two books, is that they're really open about using, so there's a trope called bury your gays, in which in every story, the gay character gets killed, the gay character gets tragically killed, the gay character dies, the gay character is dead from the beginning, the gay character is closeted the whole time. And so the idea of like bury your gays is like every time we're just in the process of like mourning, tragedy, sadness, etc. And also burying, not just burying like cemetery, but burying like from visibility and from like consciousness, queer people in books and in history, right? Like if you, like when I did history, there was no one in my history book in grade 4 when I was 10 years old in 1994, just to be clear about when that was. No one in my history book in 1994 was gay. At least it wasn't said if they were. That's the concept of burying our gays. We don't know. We talk about so-and-so's wife and children. We talk about family life if they're straight and not if they're gay. That's the way it's been for a long time. And Casey says, no. These stories are about putting gay people everywhere. Gay people in all parts of society, gay people in and I say gay because that's the like trope, but queer people, and Casey identifies as queer themselves. Queer people in like all different cultures, all different parts of history, all different locations, all different like social stratospheres, like gay people, queer people everywhere, because they are everywhere.
Yeah.
And so they talk about the idea of unbury your gays, and I love it. I love it. It's like my new favorite phrase since I've like read them saying that, like unbury your gays, like queer people everywhere. And that doesn't mean every character needs to be queer, but we do need to like show worlds and histories where queerness exists, because that is how so many people right now argue about taking away queer rights or not giving queer rights, because it's this like newfangled thing that's against nature, We have always existed.
Absolutely fucking not. Yep.
And so if we can keep telling stories that prove that we have always existed and that queerness exists in the animal kingdom, that queerness is part of life and it's natural, that those, if we are talking about natural rights on the basis of humanity, that includes queerness.
Yeah, 100%.
So unbury your gays.
Love that. And that is something that they are like, they are amazing at, like in both. I'm gonna test my memory now. More so in One Last Stop, because there is more genderqueer, gender fluid characters.
I feel differently.
Oh, actually, no, I've just remembered a key character from One Last Stop, though, to be fair.
From One Last Stop or Red, White, and Royal Blue?
From Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Yeah.
I think because... no, I've just had a brain fart.
Okay.
But in, like, One Last Stop, there are genderqueer, gender fluid characters very, very openly from the start throughout the book. But in One Last Stop, but in Red, White and Royal Blue, unless I'm misremembering or I've missed something, there is just they just allude to a trans character.
They don't allude. Well, no.
It's not in black and white. This is it? Okay, remind me then.
Okay, so just for like ease, I think I'm going to call it Royal Blue, because Red, White, and Royal Blue is a mouthful, and I struggle with calling it RWRB, which is what it's often abbreviated to online. Yeah, so I'm going to call it Royal Blue, and what I mean is Red, White, and Royal Blue, and One Last Stop. So let's start with actually talking about what the books are. Oh, do I need to pause?
Hey, Tom. Happy WHAQ day to you. I hope you're spending it whacking off. Welcome on in.
Filthy. So I'm going to start with brief synopses of both pieces. Royal Blue is about the first son of, so like the son of the President of the United States, who in this book is a woman, her son, and the Prince of Wales, or maybe, I mean, grandmother is the queen, so I'm like struggling a little bit with like what it actually is, but like heir to the throne, second in line.
I'm not sure he's Prince of. I think brother might be Prince of Wales, but whatever.
Oh yes, yeah, you're right. But anyway, mum is next in line to be queen, and he's one of the kids. And it's about their relationship and them figuring life out. They're both men, and they are like university age, like finishing university kind of age, so like 21, 22. And that's Red, White, and Royal Blue. And it starts with a really cute meet cute, and then goes from there. And I'm gonna say stuff happens. We'll talk about some of the stuff, but I don't want to like spoil everything. But like basically it's about that relationship. And one last stop is about a woman who moves to New York and meets another woman on the subway, and what happens from there. And again, we'll talk more about what happens from there. But here's the difference. The situations are so different. What we're talking about in Royal Blue is two people who exist in worlds of straightness and are themselves confronting that. And as they confront it, they discover the queerness that was hidden from them because it is hidden from many of us. So they have, like, not a spoiler, one of the security team on the president's, security team, the royal family, sorry, not the royal family, the first family's team is a trans woman named Amy. And she's trans right from the get-go. First time we meet her is a few scenes into the book. It's not when the book starts. It's later on at a ball. There's a presidential administration get-together. Something fancy. And she's there. And Alex talks to her, and she's out. And she's trans, and she's got a wife or a girlfriend.
So I must have missed, because it was Amy who I was referring to. I must have missed. I either can't remember or I missed that detail, because as far as I was aware, it was at the end of the book where she's sewing the trans flag into her jacket, and it's not like I'm sewing this flag into my jacket because it represents me. It's just I'm sewing this flag onto the jacket. So because she's not
introduced as Amy, the trans security guard.
Yeah.
But in that first set of interactions, so like she talks to Alex. Alex is the first son. Talks to Alex. Things happen. She talks to him again. Like they're at the same event together, basically. Within that evening, it was clear to me that she is trans.
Yeah, it might just be my memory failing me, but yeah, fair.
Yeah. And then there's also another. Alex's mum is president. She's divorced and remarried, so his stepdad is first gentleman. And Alex's dad is also a politician, but back in Texas, where they're from. And Alex's dad has worked really closely with a Texas senator who is also gay and was the first, like Rafael Luna, was one of the first openly gay politicians and senators, etc. And he's also Hispanic. It's important to note that Alex is Hispanic through his dad's side. His mom is white, so he's mixed race, but he's Hispanic. And I say it's important to note that through his dad's side because there's a lot of talk about like mom being white, and that's why she's palatable as a female president, etc., etc.
It's super, so it's like both stories that we've read so far have been super, super intersectional, and that was something that clearly I loved about the books as well.
Whereas, and so the story of Royal Blue is happening within contexts which are traditionally very rigid, heteronormative, etc. and you discover a bit more about it. But it's true that many of the key characters aren't queer until you start meeting, I don't want to say the extras because they're not. They're actually integral to the story, but to the structure of president and to the structure of the monarchy, they are not like central in that way.
They're not supporting characters because they're main characters, but they're not like at the top of the hierarchy, I guess.
They're main characters.
Institutional.
That's exactly the distinction, right? That's exactly the distinction I was going to make, is that they are key to the story, but they are not key to the monarchy or to the presidency. Yeah. Whereas in One Last Stop, basically what happens is August moves to New York and needs to find a like somewhere to live, a bedroom with strangers. Basically, she's moved there for school, and she interviews for this one house where basically everyone's queer, and moves in with them, and they are very much a chosen family. And so I think the reason why in some ways One Last Stop can feel more queer is because it starts from the basis of queer chosen family.
Yeah. For sure.
And the drag queen upstairs, and like all of the, like, everyone there is queer. There's a trans character, gender nonconforming. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the direct house, and then the apartment upstairs is a drag queen, etc. So it's much more chosen family. If you look at the
house I grew up in, the house I wish I was at uni.
And then August meets a woman named Jane on the subway. And as you learn more about Jane, who in some ways is a main character, she definitely is a main character. She's the other main character. But I argue in this book, August is the main character.
Yeah.
And Jane is a very close, like, second to that.
Agreed.
Whereas in Royal Blue, Alex and Henry are both main characters.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And as you learn more about Jane, you know that her life has also been surrounded by queerness after similarly leaving a very heteronormative family that had, so like in One Last Stop, we're talking about migration from heteronormativity into a world that is more visibly queer in a different way, I think. I think that in some ways, August and Jane live in the New York that would intersect with the New York of Henry and Alex at the end of Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Now it just makes me want to go on Pinterest and find all of the fan art of both the stories together of like the entire gang hanging out.
Yeah. And so we read both of them out loud. We started with One Last Stop and loved it, and I cried like through the last hour and a half of reading. And it was a big deal for us because it was also an opportunity for us to see like a good like fleshed out story with real people where they were sapphic, but not necessarily like Jane identifies lesbian-ish, queer. She loves the word queer. Jane loves the word queer. August is
bisexual.
And less labeled. Like, I think she's less like, Jane has really like fought to like be labeled queer.
Well, there's a part in the story, because I remember it being like, oh my god, drawing up parallels between like you identifying as lesbian and I identifying as pansexual, because there's a part in the book where they are on the train platform and they get in the way of a passerby, or no, sorry, they're on the train and they're skipping carriages, and someone's like, hey, like, get out of the way, I'm not I'm not going to be late because of two lesbians or words to that effect. And August is like, actually, I'm bisexual. I was just like, oh, yeah, representation.
But like, that's exactly it, right? Like, so there's Jane who is, I think, lesbian but like queer, like she's very like queer and lesbian. August is queer and bisexual. They are different, like they vary in terms of like presentation. There's a lot of stereotypes about masculinity and femininity and butch and femme and all of these things. And like August is generally more femme, but isn't just femme. And Jane is more butch, but isn't just butch. And August is plus sized, like she's large, like she's like, you know, US size like 26, right? So she's like a dress size smaller than me. And so that representation was amazing.
I knew that she was plus size. I didn't remember what size, but amazing. I love it even more now.
Yeah. So she's like large. Not that I'm, just to be clear, I'm not gatekeeping plus size. What I'm trying to say is that in mainstream media, people will call a size 10 plus size. And I'm not, I'm just trying to talk about like, because there is sizeism within the plus size community. And I'm just saying she's like a large.
She's not a small fat woman. She, you know,
yeah, exactly. She's not mid-size. She's white. Jane is Chinese. And so there's like a sapphic interracial relationship. August hasn't been with a woman before, I believe. And so like seeing that represented and seeing like...
Which is making me like well up now, like remembering and listening to you.
And so it was just really meaningful for us to experience it together. It's so well written. You fall in love with so many characters, and there's so many like just little pieces that speak to me, right? Like they listen to the radio in the evening to hear songs, like to hear, like they request songs and stuff. And so a lot of you know, like radio's been really meaningful to my life, and radio inspired us to even do this talk show. And so, you know, there's that. There's things like stealing little moments to go on dates on the train, and being afraid of committing and then wanting to commit, and like all of this stuff. And there's a lot of like navigating what it means to like each other, to love each other, to figure things out. And this is all happening on the canvas of like, spoiler alert, this is like not spoiler in terms of outcome, but spoiler alert in terms of like, it's a good scene. So I'm going to put my hand up, and I'm done when it's done when I put it down. They have an Easter party that's hosted by the drag queen for all of the like queer fam, basically, where they like wear Easter bonnets and are talking about like the rise of Jesus and all sorts of things. And it's like the I forget what it's, but anyway, they have like the brunch, and it's just like this like wild eclectic group of people at drag Easter brunch hosted by a drag queen. And that, I want to say that doesn't matter. What I mean is that's not integral to what happens at the outcome at the end, but it is integral to the fabric of this community that builds over the course of the book. And it's so good. That's all. Do you want to say anything about it before I put my hand down?
No.
Okay. Apologies if you can hear the heater running in the background. I've got heaters and stuff going for the kittens, and I can't turn them off because they're too little to keep themselves warm. Sorry, team.
I can't hear anything, so.
Okay. So yeah, so spoiler there, done. And so for us, it was really meaningful because it felt so much like an analogy to our Twitch fam. It felt like an analogy to us. It felt like
there were just so many parallels. Like I said, like, you know, one of them is lesbian, one is, you know, bisexual, and like they're interracial, and one of them's plus size, and just all of those things made it such a special book. And like on top of it being like one of the first really queer pieces of like literature I'd read, and us reading it together, and you know, all those sorts of things too.
And on top of that, we like and the parallel of like Jane, so like August not having much or any real experience with women, and Jane being like super experienced, and also like one of those who like I sometimes joke about myself, like came out gay, like I was born gay. Like I've been gay a long time and known I've been gay a long time. Despite what the fucking turfs on Twitter have decided to say today about me identifying as a lesbian. Fuck you. I'll identify however I want. Trust and believe it's going to be fabulous because it's me, so shut the fuck up.
She's not wrong though.
Fuck turfs. Fuck turfs. Yeah, so just like Jane is like very like has been engaged in queerness, has been engaged in political queerness, and is sharing that with August. And there was just a lot of like analogies there
like
that like
the
work.
concept of a talk show that's hosted on Twitch where one of them has always been queer and is really experienced and is quite political, and the other one has not long been out and is trying to navigate it all. Yeah. I don't know the name of that show though.
And I think like, so for those reasons we loved it, but those are all really personal to us. I think that regardless of whether you can relate to Jane and August in those specific ways, it is a beautiful, lovely, fun and funny, engaging story with an interesting twist that I'm not going to share, and an interesting magic to it, really, that is engaging and beautiful and like worth the read, I think, for anyone of any gender, sexuality, relationship status. Like I think there's goodness there. It's well written. There's scenes that stick in my head that have nothing to do with how relatable August and Jane are. Like there's like, not to give too much away, but there's a seance at one point. And like I still remember it so well. Like there's just these moments where like, you know how when you watch a really good movie or experience something and you can remember like this moment was really beautiful or funny and I remember it, and you remember it like a series of snapshots. One Last Stop is a beautiful story, but it's also a beautiful group of snapshots that stick with you. They're experiences and people that are really well written. And I just love it for that reason.
Well, that's exactly how I know that it is truly an engaging book, because how long ago did we read it? And I like think about it all the time. Like I've got vivid memories of like, yes, I've forgotten, bits and pieces of the plot and intricate details, but I, have got great memories, and not just great memories of us reading it, but of the actual book itself.
Yeah, and it was a long time ago. We finished it.
So probably helps a little bit too, but
we love it so much that we have a Pinterest board for fan art, because we love it so much.
Might also be
and
a
like
widget on my iPad so it circles through the pictures.
I forgot about that. But we read it in 2021. Like it's now been more than a year since we finished it. And actually I'm just looking right now.
Also, just while you're looking, I think the twist that you're referring to isn't a huge twist, and it's also mentioned in the synopsis if there's anything relating to the twist that you wanted to chat about.
I don't think so. Just so that you know, we started it in September of 2021. And we finished it in November of 2021. So we read it over the course of a number of months. And it was also like between our visits, like we had met, and then I was back in Canada and we were reading it, and like we read it like some nights we read more than others, but I'm looking at the history, right? And like we went from 7% to 9% to 15%. We must have had a weekend night. And so just looking at like us reading it, and we read it throughout the fall, basically. and it still sticks with us. So I think it's like worthy of a read for that reason. And I don't think there's anything about the twist I want to mention. It is mentioned in like the synopsis and
I
stuff.
didn't
So
know
if you're
you
that
were
curious, you
actually
can just
thinking
read it.
more of like. I want to talk about it, but not too much because it is in the synopsis. But obviously, the era that Jane was made, whether that was relevant to anything you wanted
So
to say.
just like Jane's history is rooted in the 70s. And her understanding of the world is rooted in the 70s. And so she's also able to talk about an underground queer scene to August, who isn't rooted in the 70s, in a very different way. And she's able to like explain that. And that's really beautiful too, because it's a way of like, through this twist, understanding queer history.
I was just going to say it was almost like I don't want to dismiss or minimize anything, but it was almost like a introduction into some parts of queer history for me because she's referring to like real life events in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think, like, yes, I agree totally with that. The thing I do want to say, though, is that anyone's introduction to queer history is going to be their introduction to queer history. If you start talking about the queerness in the Romans, or you start talking about, you know, the queerness in the Middle East in, you know, the year 1000, like there's different, like anything's going to be an intro. But I do think in some ways it's a very particular, the 70s and 80s were a very particular part of queer history where mainstream culture, pop culture, and queer culture intersected in invisible ways. Yeah, agreed. And it's also a part of queer history that I'm really interested in because of my activism around HIV. Because that was the birth of HIV in those years.
Yeah. But I was also sort of like referring to the fact that like my introduction hasn't been like academic. Like it's you know, yes, it's a fictional book, but based on true events. But yeah, I just found my my Goodreads review of the book as well. So.
And also, I don't want to like. I want to share too much, but I will say that we have loved this book so much. There's one thing that I'm happy to talk about in detail, and one thing that I'm just going to say lightly, that we're involving it not one way, but two ways in our wedding ceremony in September. Did you want to talk about it, Liz? Do you want to talk about...
Well, I don't know which one you want to go into detail for.
Why don't I talk about the one we're not going into detail. So one of our readings for our ceremony, I'm not telling you what it is from One Last Stop. It is a beautiful passage that when I think about, I get really teary still. And Amanda from Geek Herring is going to read it for us at our ceremony. And it's like, it's just perfect. And I'm really excited that like Amanda's going to read it and that we're going to have it because it's not just perfect for us, it's perfect for like my idea of love and what it means to have someone change your whole world. And I'm really excited that Amanda's reading it and has agreed to read it.
We hope. She's in chat like,
no, she agreed. Don't do that to me. I'm not ready. Now I'm crying everywhere. I have mascara on. Okay. So that's the one I'm not going into detail because I'm not telling you what the passage is. We're not sharing what it is except with Amanda, the officiant. Everyone else gets to hear it there for the first time.
I might be reading it right now. And then the other way it features in the wedding is our flowers are being made out of used copies of One Last Stop, dyed in oranges and pinks for the lesbian flag. And they are being made by a wonderful company that provides jobs for women who are escaping domestic violence. Which I should find a link for and put in chat perhaps.
They're called Page and Bloom. And they're based in London, and they also have a free job skills course for women who are leaving domestic violence that they partner with other organizations with. And yeah, so a copy of One Last Stop is going to be our bouquets. Our bouquets, they're going to be the bouquets of all of our bridesmaids and buttonholes and all of that. So, and parents and all of that. All of 100% of our flowers are being made with a recycled copy of One Last Stop, dyed orange and pink for us, and a little bit of green. And so, because it's just, I don't know. I'm also a book lover, right? So the idea of like recycled flowers, which are better for the environment, and supporting a domestic violence charity, support charity, and like project,
pretty
like
damn nicely, huh?
Yeah, and then being able to use this book is something else, right? Like for us. So like I can't wait to get my bouquet in July and like find August and Jane's name because you can still see the words lightly through like it's still like
God,
there's still
think about that.
Yeah, so I can't. Anyway, I'm just really excited. I just think books have the power to change the world, that's all, and I'm just really excited to carry a piece of that down the aisle to you.
You're so cute. You're so cute. Oh.
Yes, thank you, Monty. UK book girl incoming.
Do you need a tissue? Do we want to go be right back?
No, I'm okay.
Maybe
I've got a sleeve.
I'm just thinking, that's what sleeves are for. You might have heard that in a previous one of our videos. You sure? You sure you don't want to do a quick be right back, get a drink?
If you want to BRB, we can, but I'm okay.
Talk about Royal Blue a bit more?
Are you trying to tell me I should? Do I have mascara all over my face?
No, I'm just saying I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind getting a bit of squash.
Okay, so if you want to break, cool. But I don't need a tissue. I'm used to crying. Thank you, Bonnie. I do this all the time.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't have any Kleenex next to you, actually.
It's because of moving everything. You know for a fact I always used to have a box of tissue right here, and now I don't because that is my office supply rehome cubby.
Well then. All right.
So yes, happy to take a break.
Quick, BRB. I'm going to take a whiz, go and get a drink, and then we'll talk more about Royal Blue. I don't know. Who knows? Kleenex would be the perfect WHAQ sponsor. It's true. No, never mind. Okay, bye. Hello. Is everyone fed and watered? Drank and watered? Drank and fed?
Fed and watered?
That's the one. I had another wee. Had some chocolate. I made a buttermint tea. No longer available in the UK.
Although I thought we found a substitute to try.
Yes.
Yeah. I did none of those things. I argued with TERFs on Twitter who've decided to attack me.
Oh.
Which is fine. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, fuck
just,
you.
Cried.
Not about TERFs. I did have a big cry last night because the kittens are under the bed and I can't like see them as much as I want. And I don't know why she's keeping them from me. And I know why she's keeping them from me. She's keeping them from every danger. And it's not me. She's not aggressive to me at all. She's fine with me. But like, I literally was so exhausted last night that I was hanging my head. I had my mattress pulled off my bed, hanging my head over my bed frame, looking at these kittens with a flashlight while sobbing, saying, I promise I won't hurt them. I wish you weren't keeping them from me. But it was just projection because I've been struggling. That's all.
But not about
Rebel's
TERFs.
great. But not about TERFs. They can all go fuck themselves.
Be more queer, be more goth, tell the toughs to fuck right off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Look at the closed captions. Be more Kirby Morgan, tell the truth to fuck off.
The captions do keep calling them TERFs, like surf and turf, which I think is funny.
Maybe we should eat them.
I bet they taste terrible. That much bitterness? Ugh.
Better than rich people? Or?
Nah, rich people. You know what? I'm not going into
Rich
who I like the flavor of.
Foie gras. Anyway.
Yeah, so one last stop, read it. What's up?
Sorry, I got a Snapchat notification.
Okay.
Like, bloop, bloop.
Yeah, so one last stop, read it. It's great. Royal Blue.
Royal Blue.
Royal Blue is the first book that they wrote, that Casey McQuiston wrote, or at least the first that they published. And it's about the first son of the United States of America and one of the members of the close, like, royal family, grandson to the Queen, named Henry. The first son of the United States is named Alex. And their relationship, which starts out when they're teenagers, and they're at like the Olympics in Brazil, maybe, and they like hate each other immediately. Yeah. Did you want to say anything? Because I know I just talk and talk, so I'm going to leave you some space.
I'm more than happy to let you talk and talk. I love listening to you. But yeah, another corker by Casey McQuiston. So I was gonna say this one wasn't quite as special. That's not what I mean. When we go back to the personal reasons why One Last Stop was so special to us, there's less of that. You know, it's gay, like it's MLM. Go on.
I was just gonna say, like, it's special but less relatable.
That's what I was getting at, and it's like, about two incredibly influential and rich families, and like, what? I don't really understand that. There is a mixed race character. Obviously, I relate to that on some levels. How much I relate to that is a very long and complicated topic, which is for a different podcast. So yeah, it was great. A very, very good book. Again, just not as relatable as One Last Stop for me.
Sorry, I thought you were done. No. Go ahead. So I think that I think that both books have real journeys that these characters go through that you become very invested in, or at least I became very invested in. I think the reader becomes very invested in. But they are different.
Mm-hmm. I did think of one relatable point, to be fair, but go on.
Why don't you share it?
Well, I was thinking about Alex's journey with his sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to sort of like, I guess it is still compare. Like, he didn't realize he was queer, or like, you know, was just thought that's what boys did, and then was like, oh fuck, I'm not straight. So
yeah,
that bit was, you know, relatable. But
I think, though, in both books, as Alex so Alex is bisexual as well, and he comes to terms with his queerness. I think that both August, like, it's a little different because August hasn't been with a woman, but doesn't, I would say, doesn't question her sexuality, doesn't have the same realization about her sexuality. She's clearly found women attractive before and things like that.
It's kind of an opposite, right? Like,
yes, where like Alex has had some experience.
Yeah, she's attracted to women but has never been with a woman, whereas Alex didn't think he was attracted to men, but let one suck him off. Like, that's sort of, to be correct.
Yeah. But I think, and like, this is why I love doing stuff like this, because as I'm externally processing, I'm an external processor, I'm coming to think about this. I think that as different as Alex and August's journeys are to discovering their own queerness, it in and of itself is like an analogy or a parallel to the idea of unburying your gaze. Because what it is these things were in them and were happening, but they weren't recognizing them as queer because the world around them was telling them what queer was and what queer wasn't, and what straight was and what straight wasn't. And they felt that they needed to, like, that they couldn't identify as queer, or it wasn't a word for them, or, you know, those things, because they've been fed such narrow experiences of queerness. And so when you start to open up what the stories of queerness are and their experiences, like, it's like that parallel is there. The parallel of unburying their gaze is what's happening with the queerness realization in both August and Alex in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I still cried with particular parts of Alex and Henry. I think that what we're talking about in Red, White, and Royal Blue, because it is public and they are public figures, and because they are famous and influential, as Liz was saying, we're also on a bit of a different journey, because August, like in One Last Stop, August and Jane are reckoning their own relationship and their lives and their place in their life and in their family. And it's very like personal and small world. Alex and Henry are confronting what it means to be the grandson of a queen and the son of a president who's up for re-election. It's like an election year. And whether their queerness is going to be collateral damage to their family's reputations. They're going to be collateral damage in being queer. And so they're talking, you know, like, they are dealing with the pressures of being famous. They're dealing with the pressures of, like, whether they're allowed to be queer because of who they are in the world. They're dealing with those things. But ultimately,
they've got an added layer of, like, yes, okay, I need to work out my queerness, but also I need to work out, can I be with this other very influential person?
And not just because they themselves are influential, but what does it mean for politically engaged people in two different countries where, like, they were kind of born into it. Now, you find it really early on. You find out really early on that Alex also kind of has a plan to be a senator and go to law school, be a senator, et cetera, et cetera. Like, he wants to enter politics as well. But up until this point, his involvement in politics has been his mom's campaign, his dad's campaign. So he's still choosing it on one hand, but up until now, he's also kind of been born into it. Like, it's not been just his choice. Like, it's not his choice. His mom ran for president and was a legislator before that, etc. It's not his choice that his dad is a Texas legislator. And so similarly with Henry, he was born into the monarchy, and at 22 years old, the grandson of the queen, there's also, like, he hasn't had a lot of choice at this point either. That's not to say they don't have privilege. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they haven't had a choice in where what families they're in. But it's also like a political thing, like for a child of a sitting US president to be engaged with the grandson of the current monarch of the UK and the Commonwealth. Like, so it's not just like, you know, like, can Alex do this because he's famous? Can Alex do this with Henry because of the possible political shitstorm?
Ramifications, yeah.
Yeah.
You put it so eloquently.
I think that
big word and everything.
Yeah. Because of the political ramifications.
Thank you.
So for me, the emotional impact was, yes, I was invested with Alex and Henry, but I was also invested in the world that could allow or even celebrate these things. And so for me, the emotional hook was, yes, I felt for them and wanted them to be able to have what they wanted. But it was also about the hope of this world. And I think that it's important to note that Casey started writing this book when Obama was president and when it looked like Hillary was going to be elected. And while they were writing it, Trump was elected. And they actually stopped writing this book for a little while because it felt too heavy. It felt like making an alternative universe where it was Casey's job to give us hope and like paint a different picture and all of that. And so they've talked about how they
that at the start or the end of the book,
in the acknowledgements at the end. Yeah. And because of that, so much of my emotion was also being wrapped up in this portrait of a world where things could be better. And we were also reading it like around the time of like, when did the Queen pass away?
God, now you put me on the spot. Queen Lizzie death.
September. So just before we started reading it.
Yeah.
So, because I was thinking about it, the reason I'm asking and like being specific is because I thought about that a bit when we were reading it, because I knew that by the end of it, she'd passed away when we were reading it, because so much of this, like in parts of the story, content spoiler, but not about Alex and Henry. I will put my hand down when I'm done. Henry's father has passed away. And it's put his mother, who is the next in line to the throne, in a depressive spin, basically. And like, just to be clear, he doesn't pass away in the book. He's passed away a number of years ago at the start of the book. And Henry's mom is still very much living in her grief. And throughout the book, she finds her own voice again. And why that impacts me a bit more with the context of our Queen's death, like Queen Elizabeth, is because it was such another hopeful moment of, in this book, the monarchy making a different choice than I think King Charles would make. And so for me, it wasn't just this like hopeful story like that Casey knew they were writing at the time they published it around what it would look like if Trump wasn't president, but it was also the story about what it would be to have the next in line to the throne have a backbone. which I don't think Charles does.
Mm-hmm.
To like own their position in the world. And I'm not here in this moment to talk about whether the monarchy should or shouldn't exist, because it's a bigger conversation than this. But imagine if we just assume the monarchy exists, but it's the people involved have different values and are pushing progressive values where family is about love and not about, hierarchy, what that could be. So for me, it was also emotional in ways that Casey, I don't think, could have predicted in quite that way, where we were reading it as Charles is becoming king. So Elizabeth has died, Charles is becoming king, and we're watching the next heir to the throne in this book stand up to her mother and say, like, fuck you, we're going to do it differently. And there's nothing you can do about it because it'll be a PR disaster.
And it's obviously like hit differently in the context of like Harry and Meghan too, right? Like, so.
Yep. And this one is a bit fun too, because it is an intercontinental relationship, and so we totally understand
private
the like
jets and emails, and we don't understand the.
We don't have private jets. Where's your private jet? Have you been hiding it from me? Because that would have made this a lot easier. But anyway, so I'm gonna put my hand down because we're done talking about the spoilers. But yeah. But yeah, so it's also an intercontinental relationship. So it's kind of funny when like they're talking like Alex is like, I get up and Henry's halfway through his day kind of thing, like, and I'm just like, yep, know that feeling. And like the pain of like the 8-hour flight to see each other for a weekend and which they can do, but more easily than we can for sure. But yeah. But I do think that like one of the things that I think is interesting about Red, White, and Royal Blue that One Last Stop doesn't provide is a sense of what it could be like to have queer pop culture role models, because it's clear that part of what's happening in the book is that there is queerness out there. It's it's the late 20 teens. It's 2020. But it's different. And so I think in some ways this like AU, alternative universe, where it's like almost fan fiction of the real world with the president's son and the queen's grandson, is also giving us queer famous role models in a way that fan fiction has often written straight people as queer. Like fan fiction has often been queer. So I think like there's something there. I don't really know the point I'm making, other than there's long been a history of finding famous people to make queer in our stories because we need role models. Yep. And there it was happening in front of us. And so I think
written for us, we didn't have to go through the effort of doing it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I can only imagine how powerful this book is for queer men, teenagers. I know that John, who's in our chat sometimes and hangs out with Geek Herring, has talked about loving it. And I just think that there's like that potential there. Like, what if this is like, what if romance and contemporary stories were for men too, right? Because a lot of times they're not. And so
for sure.
I think that's beautiful too. I read less MLM romance right now just because I read less everything right now. But like queer romance is beautiful and is for all genders. And, books with non-binary like romance, like there's a place for it for sure. And I think that there's a place for this book in so many people's hands.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, biases aside, out of the two, which book do you think is the most fun?
What do you mean by fun?
You tell me.
Okay. I think if you want to have, like, if you want to read, like I'm thinking of this book called American Royals, which is like YA, but like is like what if the US had adopted a monarchy system instead of a presidential system, and like these are the lives of like the rich and famous American royals in the 2000s. if you want to read, like you're reading about famous people, if you want to read about private jets, if you want to read about politics, if you want to read like you're watching the Jackie Collins documentary and people are cavorting with JFK and it's like a little bit fun and a little bit sexy and you're like on private jets and sending emails and text messages and all of that. Like if that's what you want, like if that's your idea of fun, Royal Blue. Because what you get is the queer experience, but also this like the way the other half lives.
There's some
Private
scandal
jets,
too, which we
a
haven't,
little bit of
mentioned.
scandal. Yeah, and like oh the seedy bits of the family and like oh this is the underground of what's
He's the
happening
black
here.
sheep of the family, and
Yeah, so if you want like almost like it's not soapy when you read it, but if you love that like I don't want it to be relatable, I want it to be escapist, Royal Blue, that's the one. If you want to read about more found family, if you want to read about quaintness, if you want to read about like a warm hug, then it's One Last Stop.
And I think I know the answer to this then. So if you were to, because in Royal Blue as well, there is an element of chosen family. Some of it is family of origin mixed with, some friendships. It is Henry, the main character, his sister, Alex's sister, Alex and his sister's best friend, who is the vice president's granddaughter. So there's like,
Yes, indeed.
Yes, memory. There is some like, friends, chosen family pieces in there. Which group would you want to hang out with? From what book?
Man, I thought this was going to be a different question, so I have a different answer prepared.
Okay. Well, then you'll have to tell me that answer afterwards.
Okay, so the question is like, which group do I want to live in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's actually tough for me because I majored in political studies and I have a master's in public policy. And like this whole thing where it's like a bunch of like 20 somethings in the world of the president and like learning to be communications officers and like talking about like actual policy and all of this stuff and like the road to like radical transformative change within government. Like I am there. Like
Sure,
I want to be.
I was expecting you to say One Last Stop because
I
I
know.
completely forgot that piece of it, that side of things.
Yeah, I want to be Alex's bestie. I want to be June's bestie. I want to like work with them. I want to be the aide to their mom. I want to like work like because it's like women in politics throughout this book is like it doesn't matter that it's two main characters are men. What it's actually about in so many ways is women in politics and how politics changes when women are in power, which is what I fucking believe. I believe that right now politics sucks because it's a replication of patriarchy. I want to be there. I want to be doing that. And I don't need to go on stage for a political rally, but I want to be at the political rally. I want to be like, they discover that like there's good speechwriters within the family and things like that and good like comms people and stuff like that. Like I have managed political campaigns in a federal election. Like that's the world. And so when they were in those offices and stuff, like I just was living. And so red, white, and royal blue.
You're making my heart burst right now.
And I know you don't expect that because of the warm hug of One Last Stop, but like.
But true, but I mean, it was silly of me to forget your love of governance and policy.
Yeah.
So what did you think I was going to ask?
I thought you were going to ask, like, all biases aside, which book is the type of book I want to read?
Oh, go on then.
And it's a complicated answer because in some ways I am a fucking trash panda and I just want to eat and read junk food. And so to me, red, white, and royal blue is way more like
junky.
Like, Yeah, like, oh my gosh, she's got an engagement ring on. Who's it
It's
from?
the soapy thing that you were just talking about. It's
It's
yeah, the
reality
soapy
TV. It's
element.
that like it's that same thing that I love. And like I don't want to turn people off from the book because it's not that up here, but it's that down here. Like the interplay and stuff. And there is a character that shows up with an engagement ring on and you're like, and I'm like, I know who it is. I know. And that I love that. But like, do I want to escape or do I want to go home?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I want to escape, I want to read Royal Blue. And if I want to go home, I want to read One Last Stop. Yeah. What about you?
Honestly, I don't think I could have put that any better. Like, One Last Stop made me feel so warm and fuzzy, and like, a big difference between the books was that in One Last Stop, it was a bunch of queer people who were unapologetically queer and they knew who they were and they lived authentically. And in Royal Blue, it was two guys who were in the closet, who were having to hide, who were like being chased by paparazzi. And that's not a big element of it, but they were like couldn't be seen in public together, so they couldn't be themselves, which was very much the feels like home, warm fuzzy hug versus like, I felt sad for Alex and Henry because they couldn't be themselves, and it had to be all emails and FaceTime and whatever else.
Yeah.
So yeah, you summed it up pretty well.
But they're both amazing.
They are. They're both brilliant, and I can't wait to read the third one.
Mm-hmm.
I say the third one like it's a series. Casey McQuiston's third book.
Mm-hmm. And I do think like one of the things that feels really important to say is that I bang on about representation in books all the time, right? So I bang on about like it's important for everyone to be able to see themselves. Yes, all of that is true. I'm not discounting all of that. But representation isn't the goal. The goal is good books. Good books include all sorts of characters. And it's not a good book because there's a trans person in it. It's not a good book because it's got lesbians in it. It's not a good book because the president of the United States is a woman in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the thing that's most important is that Casey McQuiston is a fucking great author in my mind.
Well, good stories
Like,
create that representation, right? It's not like
I think I would phrase that differently.
go on. I think you know
Good
what I mean,
stories
though.
good stories require that representation.
Yeah. Yeah.
To tell a good story, you have to tell a fulsome story, and it includes brown people and gay people and, like
Mm-hmm.
people in other
It's
places.
like starting with the story as opposed to like, I don't know, as opposed to like starting with the characters. I don't know.
Mhm.
Well, at least I don't know how to word it.
Yeah. I think though that like sometimes, and as someone who's like reviewed books for a long time and like not in any professional capacity, but just like has talked about books for a long time, I find myself sometimes getting into the trap of like, we're looking for books with fat female main characters, and I stop. I allow things to be a little bit shittier because they've got good representation,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm supporting it because it's good enough and
Yeah.
it's there and da da da. And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like good books that have queer characters.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that it's like that representation wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't shoehorned in. It wasn't, I've got a great story here, but if I want to sell books, one of these people should be gay. Like, it's just well crafted.
For sure.
I say they all, as I say, we haven't read the third one. They were both well crafted.
And what Mani said in chat is really true around like there's a difference between someone writing something that they don't have an experience in and no knowledge of, like men have done for ages, and someone telling their own stories. And that's where like the own voices thing comes in, right? So there's like a hashtag own voices movement within literature that started like 2019 or 2018. And it's about the idea that like it's not that white people can't write black main characters. It's that we need to give black people the chance to write black main characters. And when we have an equal amount of like people of all types writing all types of stories, you can write whatever story you want.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't be depending on the same people to tell new stories. We should be asking new people to tell their stories.
There we go.
But yeah. So I just think like Casey McQuiston, banging author, gonna read everything they put out. And like I can't wait to get our bouquets and tweet at them and hope that they see it and be like, we loved your book so much, it's our wedding flowers.
So excited.
Yeah. Because I just want them to know like how much they've impacted us. Yeah, Jinx. But it's hard, right? It's hard when it's hard. So Jinx says in chat, like, the way I failed and tried and failed to explain this to my dad, because it's hard. It's so hard to explain to people who don't understand being told no, that that's not for you, because they can't get over the no to understand the reason. And the reason isn't, no, it's not for you because you shouldn't. It's, no, it's not for you because you need to leave space for other people.
Yeah.
Because sometimes all people can hear is like, why can't I do the thing? And the fixation is, I can't do the thing, instead of why. And it becomes this thing of like, you know, but if we want to have real equality, then everyone needs to be able to write these people. True.
All lives matter.
But what we're not talking about whether you can or cannot write whatever character. It's about the fact that you need to leave space for other people to write too. Yes, exactly, Mani. I also think men often categorically aren't able to understand the experience of not having all the privilege. So like, again, when you're told no, like it fucks you up when you've only ever been told yes and you assume there's yeses everywhere.
For sure. Oh, Jinx.
Yep. And that's what it comes down to, right? Jinx is like, when you're the first person to say no, you're the like enemy, regardless of what the reason is. The whole fixation becomes on the no, the I can't, and I should be allowed to. Yeah. And it's tough. And it's tough because you have to get over that hurdle of rejection, right? Of that hurdle of like, no, in order to like recenter and understand the context why it's happening. But in order to understand the context of what's happening, you have to stand outside of your emotional self, or at least access a different part of your emotional self. And the exact thing that happens when you're told no is that you center in that emotional self and react. So it's tough. But important. And I'm really fucking excited that one of my favorite authors is a non-binary bisexual person.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Should we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do
I'm
you,
good.
do you have Goodreads open? Because you must have left a review, right?
I did not. I did not have the words to do so.
You don't have a review for Royal Blue?
I don't think so.
Because I've got a very short, succinct review for One Last Stop. I thought it might be fun for you to give one and me to give the other to end.
But I don't think I have reviews of either of them.
Oh.
I haven't been writing reviews much lately. Last few years.
Well then. So
please share yours.
Yeah, I gave, like I said, very short, very succinct review of One Last Stop. And I wrote, "It's queer as fuck and magical. I'm only a couple of books into my newfound love of reading, but this is everything I needed. Lust, love, drag queens, pancakes. I saw so much of myself and my girlfriend in this book. That, married with the wonderfully bright and colourful writing, made me feel very much at home." Which is...
Yeah.
Comes back to that warm, fuzzy hug, huh?
Yeah, and also reminds me that we didn't mention that like a key's setting in One Last Stop is the local like pancake like
house.
diner, basically. Yeah. Huh?
Pancake house.
Yeah. And that's really fun too, because it's nice to have like One Last Stop really does settings really well. And so it's like, you know, the train and the apartment and the pancake house and like there's just Rolly Bangs, which is a game they play in the book. And so like I think it would actually be amazing as theater, because I can just see like the curtains closing and opening on
or
the pancake
tables
house
rolling across the stage. Oh my god.
And like and the train and all of that. Like I think it would really lend itself well to theater.
This is gonna be the never-ending episode. Do you know what you've just reminded me?
As if every episode isn't the never-ending episode.
Royal Blue film, Amazon.
Yeah. It's going to be a film.
Totally forgot. Yeah, so they've just finished wrapping up. They've just wrapped it.
A couple months ago.
So, not long ago, wrapped. And I think it's an Amazon, like it's going to be Amazon Prime. Film adaptation of Red, White and Royal Blue. So, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there's an episode in that at some point.
We could have a watch party. A WHAQ watch party and reaction, live react, like watch it together and then go on stream and talk about it with like more than just us.
Or if it's on Amazon Prime, we could do an actual Twitch watch party.
True.
It means people need Amazon Prime to join in, but well then.
Yeah, so the lead actors confirmed on Instagram that primary production had completed in August. So it should be soon.
Ooh.
And it is Amazon Studios. You are correct. But I do think like watch party and then sit on stream and chat about it with like other GHP folks and friends. I'm in.
Little panel.
Yeah. And just like gossip like with your friends about a movie you just watched. Like we had a sleepover.
Cute.
Yeah. I'm in. Okay.
Right.
We do need to end. We actually need to end. Yeah, and I need to like pack still. There's a lot of packing to do. Look, as people commented at, look at these shelves.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us, gang. Let's go find someone to raid, I guess.
Yeah, you pick today, me love.
Me lover. Screwfix 12 radar guess. Closed captions are struggling with me tonight.
Sometimes your accent is tough for closed captioning.
Oh my god, I just looked at the sidebar and was like, Geek Herring alive, let's read them.
We are Geek Herring.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, you're looking, I'm going to say something completely unrelated to say like, oh my goodness, I have been unsubscribing from junk email and like not just junk email, but like email from like political parties and stuff that like I just don't need anymore because I'm moving, and also like junk email that I've signed up for over like buying something in 2020 to support whoever artist in the pandemic. And it has like been revolutionizing my inbox in like the amount of spoons it takes when I open it. And this like while we were live, I only got 3 emails. Beautiful.
Do we how are we going to tell the raid recipient who is in the driving seat today?
Was
there a command for it?
I know we talked about something like
WHAQ
Gem
raid?
and Liz, Gem and Liz with, like, can we just do something like Gem and Liz with Geek Herring Productions, or as Geek Herring Productions, or here Geek Herring TV, or here to whack you off? Oh, what did I miss? Oh, I mean, we can also crowd taverns and whack people off. I mean, there's been whole like business models based on that. So
Hang on. Are we going to have to cut to be right back again?
why?
What? I can't talk about Kleenex, but you can talk about making money out of whacking. Anyway.
It's a brothel.
Right. We need to work on this, but I'm going to...
We're here to crowd your tavern and whack you off in your fish pond. You all are seeing what I'm like when I'm not live on the internet. Bit by bit, yes.
I might have taken a little bit of inspiration from Scoot.
Okay.
You might veto this one.
Gem and the gang? I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't love Pride Kappa, but I'm here with that.
Oh, God.
I'm here to whack people off with a crew.
Gem, Liz, and the crew are here to whack off for you.
Yep.
And then I'll paste the Geek Herring Productions as a collective.
Okay.
Wonderfully written. I am a poet. I don't know, Amanda. Okay.
that would be... that would be
sense.
great, Amanda. Thank you.
That makes sense. Okay, let me tell recipient I'm going to whack them off instead. Let me copy that. Okay, so...
Next week, we're doing a back-to-back. So next week, we're here with... we're going to talk about compulsory heterosexuality compet and how that impacts recognizing that you're gay, that you're queer.
I'm thinking Fawn. Fawn is playing
Didn't we do
Chia.
Fawn last time?
Oh, maybe. Just thinking sponsored stream. Fawn is now, someone who I've met in offline also.
Yep.
I had the pleasure of meeting them whilst I was in Canada. I don't know what other friendos are online, and I need to go to bed. So
let's do Fawn. I'm happy to go see Jess.
This raid message, I guess. We'll work on it. We'll workshop it next week. What was that?
I'm just workshopping literally everything in my life right now, and I'm like, it's just another thing on my to-do list. Yeah, I'm working on it.
I'm sorry, Puddin'. Okay. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. That was a fun one. We love you, Casey. Yeah. Next week, comp het. Gem's in the driving seat again. Because, she's fucking pro and very...
And then you're going to do it the week before I move.
Knowledgeable and wonderful. So Gem will be in the driving seat again next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you. See you all soon. Peace out, A-Town down. Bye.